Cents Per Mile, featuring Charles Gracie, Paul Gibson, and Josh Haynes. Everyone knows the trucking industry has issues, but most people are afraid to talk about it.
Someone's got to do it.
With loads of recruiting and marketing experience and backed by the largest driver audience in the world, we deliver carriers the driver perspective, find solutions, and help make sense make sense.
Thank you for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson.
Hey, I'm Josh Haynes. Gentlemen, new episode. What are we talking about?
We're talking about marketing tips and tricks.
Yeah, just like last week when we talked about recruiting, there might be a lot of things that, are a little bit more different that are underutilized in trucking that you may or may not have been exposed to, or not realizing that it could actually boost your efforts quite a bit.
We're going to go deeper than saying that you're like family.
Not hard. So that being said, same thing we say every week. So we're on all the major listening platforms. We're on YouTube. So if you could go like, subscribe, rate the podcast anywhere you listen to it or watch it, because that helps push us further out and gives us a lot more traction.
You can also find us at centspermilepodcast.com, where you can submit a topic to be a guest or even to become a sponsor.
Yep. And also in the description, you can actually find a link where you can get a discount to F3, FreightWaves' big festival, the Festival of Freight, that happens this fall. And you can get a sweet discount if you use our link. But that being said, who's our sponsor today, Charles?
Well, it's TAFS. And if you want to make your factoring fun and you want it to actually pay, check them out at TAFS.com.
All right, cool. Well, with that, I think it's time for the news. All right, so now it's time for the news, where we go back on CDLLife and we try to find some of the coolest or most interesting stories from the last couple weeks. And recently, more than 500 drivers are set to be laid off as UPS shuts down their Baltimore warehouse through 2025. That's kind of interesting. It's going to be a few years that it's shut down.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of these, though. You know, UPS is much like those mail carriers that we saw shut down. They're a niche market. When they lose capacity in an area like they are right now, they have no choice but to shut down an entire section of their business because it's completely dependent on that niche market.
This is pretty opposed to, where I stand on things. But you also can't help but wonder, and it might not be related, but it's just where my brain goes. I wonder, maybe does this have anything to do with that, the union winning the negotiations last year? I don't know.
It'd be fun to look back at all the ones that shut down and how many of them were union and figure out that percentage.
Yeah. Anyway, so next story. Loves has started numbering their truck spots. Which has a lot of drivers thinking, or supposedly, I guess the main story that's being given is that it's for like DoorDash drivers. So a driver, if they order DoorDash or Uber Eats or something like that, they can know what spot to go to. There's a couple different things that's been said they could be used for, but there's a lot of people, and I think it's reasonable, that thinks that Loves is going to start charging for parking.
I mean, it'd be a pretty quick crossover. You got the numbers on there for delivery purposes. I mean, it's reasonable to think that, but I don't think it'd be in their best interest to make them fully paid for parking.
But I mean, you could argue that pretty much everybody else already does. So I don't know that really hurts them that much.
Yeah, truck stops have a fair amount of free parking, so I'd imagine that's going to stay there. But I mean, this is one of those self-inflicted things that we've seen, because I used to go to truck stops all the time to shut down, and a lot of times you'll see the same truck there for weeks or months. Like, people use them as a storage yard, and that removes the whole premise of making it available parking for people passing by and spending money.
All right, well, that being said, I think it's time to go behind the wheel. All right, well, it's time for Behind the Wheel. So being powered by CDLLife and them having the world's largest driver audience, we can actually ask them questions, and we get real data from real drivers with real opinions. So since we're talking about marketing, and drivers are constantly blasted with ads, we decided to ask, how often do you see ads for trucking companies on the internet? 6% said monthly, 9% said weekly, 31% said almost every ad I see is for a trucking company, and 54% said daily. So that's interesting that there's so many ads the drivers get served with. I mean, well over half said, hey, I'm getting this daily, or at the point where it's like everything I see is an ad for a trucking company. So that's kind of I mean, that's what I thought was going to happen, but that's kind of interesting.
Oh, it's what I knew was going to happen, because I remember when someone put my info into a job board, and I'm still getting hit with stuff. I'm actually, like I said, I'm turning it into a sales proposition. So I send a link to Hot Seat at this point, because I'm like, at some point they got to get it to the point that I'm not a driver anymore. But it is indicative of the market that these drivers are in. They're highly sought after. Even when we're hearing carriers say that they're near capacity, they still flood them with ads looking for that unicorn in the mix.
Well, and I think the other thing too is, we've talked about on the show before, but it's that much more important to figure out a way to cut through the noise, which is a lot of what we're going to cover today. But before we do, it's time to go behind the desk with Tenstreet.
All right, it's time for our sponsored segment, Behind the Desk with Tenstreet. We got Sarah Young. Welcome to Cents Per Mile.
Thanks so much for having me on, y'all. So I want to kick things off by talking about advertising diversification and the need to adapt as the market shifts and driver behavior shifts with it. And so at Tenstreet, we actually see that carriers using 5 or more advertising sources receive 10% more applications per truck than those using fewer sources. And so what this shows us is that vendor diversification really is key in today's driver market. Casting a net to reach more active job seekers better positions recruiters to get the volume of apps that they need to fill those empty trucks. And so one of our mantras on the job store concierge team here at Tenstreet is don't put all your eggs in one basket. And the bottom line is that different advertising platforms perform better for different jobs and regions. And so as the advertising experts, it's on us to analyze that data and make informed decisions on ad placement. And another important hack is making the most of your ad spend by engaging quickly with incoming applications. And at Tenstreet, we actually find that carriers who contact applicants within 5 minutes see a 4.75% increase in their hiring rate. And so this means that they're converting applications to hires at a higher rate, no pun intended, therefore maximizing their ad dollars. And with all that being said, high application volume can be overwhelming, and 5 minutes can fly by in the blink of the eye. And so this time to contact doesn't have to fall solely on the recruiter. And this is where Tenstreet's job board scrubber solution comes into play. It acts as a virtual recruiter of sorts, automatically engaging with applicants as soon as they apply via text or email. And this really takes the pressure off of the recruiters, as they can see a 6% higher conversion rate from lead app to full app just by using job board scrubber. And so in short, speeding up that time to contact significantly impacts engagement with applicants. And when we break it down even further to think about this from a cost per application basis, this increase in conversion rate we see with quicker time to contact can make a real difference when it comes to making the most out of every last penny of your ad spend. And while we only had a few minutes to dive into some of my favorite marketing hacks, one of my job store teammates, Drew Sparks, just co-hosted a webinar chock full of them. And if you want to hear an hour of marketing tips and tricks from Tenstreet, check out our most recent video on our YouTube channel.
At TAFS, we offer unparalleled trucking excellence and service. Enjoy exclusive benefits like fantastic tire discounts and 1-hour advances for quick cash. Recognized as the top factoring company in 2023, we're your partner for success. Access business loans, manage finances with ease through our client portal, F2 fuel card, and mobile app. Contact us now to see how we can help your trucking business thrive.
All right, so now it's time to make sense and talk about our main topic, which is marketing and some underutilized techniques that you can use to possibly get some traction. And what we talked about earlier and showed with the data is a super noisy, cutthroat environment.
I mean, it is interesting because everyone has their own way of doing the marketing. You just look at us, we're very different with how we approach things, but then there's certain things that we do the same. And then you look at these companies that are very much different. They have completely different identities, but yet somehow at the end, they all sound the same.
The number one thing, I would say, and maybe I'm biased being a video guy and that kind of thing, but I think the most important thing is your content. Sure, you can place all these ads, but like in every trucking company essentially does something fundamentally different. They operate in a different way. Maybe they, obviously different kind of trailers, different types of freight. But somehow it doesn't really matter what you do differently. Charles is right. Almost every single ad has the same vibe or the same sort of like effect. While being different, it's all the same. And that's the number one thing you can do is get content and get ads that actually stand out and disrupt people when they're sitting there scrolling through their timelines.
Well, and it's how do you want to sound different? That's where I think people need to spend more time rather than just where do they think they win. We've talked about that in the past. I don't even want to touch upon that because we've talked about it so much. But as far as how are you going to position yourself to stand out? I'll use some of my personal experiences. I am always posting. That's a tip we've covered multiple times, but you can't always be out there selling. Like sometimes you have to put educational stuff out there. Sometimes you have to put fun stuff out there. Sometimes you have to put stuff that's personal out there. And very often I'm seeing these things where it's just like, almost feels like you're walking onto a used car dealership lot and they're just always selling. Like, I want to get to know the people I'm buying from. I want to get to know the brand I might align my career with. I want to get to know what's your goals, what's your motivation, why do you do what you do, and I think a lot of people leave that stuff out.
Well, and I think it was also summed up pretty good by Andy on season 3, episode 2, when he said the worst thing anyone can feel about your brand is nothing. So it's one of those things where it's like, even if I feel like a lot of people are uncomfortable with rocking the boat, but it's like, if you don't, you're not going to stand out at all, and it's better to have people talking about you because you're going to get more people that hear that. And even if the talk is negative, they're going to be like, oh, well, I actually like that. It's kind of like Nickelback. A lot of people talk trash, but somehow they're multi-platinum selling artists.
Of all things you could circle back to, it was Nickelback.
I mean, it's a great example. Or even like politicians, like that happens all the time in politics. But that being said, who's our first guest, Charles?
We have a return visitor. It's Kevin Hall from CDLLife. Welcome to Cents Per Mile again, Kevin.
Glad to be here, guys. Always great when you get invited back, right? There must be something there. I don't know what that is, but good to be with y'all.
The reason we wanted to bring you on is you and I were having a conversation about a couple different things, and you started talking about your views on marketing, not only as far as CDLLife, but as an individual and the shopping cart theory. So I kind of wanted to dive into that because I thought it had a lot of value.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you look at just take e-commerce, for example, one of the biggest issues is abandoned shopping carts. And we actually see that in driver recruiting today. I mean, how many people are applying, but not really ready to make a decision or make a move in their career? I mean, I say this all the time. It's a big step to change your career, to say that you're going to put your life in the hands of this company that you saw, all those ads on Facebook or whatever, right? That you think that, hey, this is a good opportunity. So when you talk about marketing, I'm sure your next guest is awesome. He'll talk a lot about how to get your brand in front of the right people at the right time, optimize your spend, all of those things, how to intelligently target the messaging. But for me, the biggest thing that you can do is figure out, are you ready to close those deals when you get them, right? All those abandoned shopping carts, are you just letting them go? All those drivers who you didn't close right out of the gate, are you just letting them go? What are you doing with those? Like, that's a huge investment in the marketing spend. And so for me, at a high level, if I look at marketing, I want the return, right? That's what I'm looking at, the dollar return, and taking that view at it from this perspective.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because, we go through these weird phases, especially noticeable in trucking, where everyone wanted to be an owner operator. Everyone wanted to be a recruiter. Everyone thinks they're a marketing company nowadays. You see all these pop-up shops, but they're not doing anything different. So what should someone be looking for when they're looking for a marketing company to present their brand?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, marketing is not a linear process, right? Somebody who understands that they're not just driving you a bunch of leads and it stops there, right? A counselor, somebody that understands that you're really talking about the journeys that these drivers go on to, one, get to know you, to even know that you exist, all the way through to making a decision about how they're changing their career to come join you. And so when you talk about a consultant, a team to partner with, to invest your dollars in, it's not about where you're placing your marketing spend. To me, that's not today's marketing. Today's marketing is more about communicating and building journeys and relationships over a period of time, and really maximizing that investment, whether you want to call it branding, lead generation, demand generation. It all kind of goes hand in hand. But that's what you're really investing in, right? Is getting somebody in a seat or closing an e-commerce deal or whatever your sell is that you're investing in marketing. And so I think when you look, again, go back to the consultant that you look at, do you need a marketing agency? Do you need a consultant? What do you really do? What are you really investing that for?
Yeah, that's some great information, because these carriers, these companies that are trying to extend their brand, they got a lot of noise to sift through to find that right partner. And sometimes I feel like it's just kind of throw money at the wall and see what sticks approach. And I disagree with that, because if you're working with a partner, they're going to find out what's driving your brand, what's important, and they're going to have those hard conversations because it's in your best interest. Absolutely.
I mean, again, if you don't know what your marketing dollars is returning and you don't have the framework with which to, everybody talks about attribution. I mean, if your processes aren't in place to really do good testing, what does attribution really give you? It just tells you how many leads came in from what source. And if the processing of those leads vary between how one recruiter works over another, you're not really doing quality A/B testing. Like, you're just really throwing it up on the wall to see what sticks. And so you got to have I would say don't spend any marketing until you have your things in place, your house in line, to make sure that you can understand what happens to that investment and that you're wringing every value out of each dollar that you're spending in marketing.
That's some great information. If people wanted to reach out to you guys to get your expertise, how would they find you guys?
Yeah, CDLLife.com, download our mobile app, CDLLife, through any of the stores that you can do on your phone. And then CDLConnect.io shows all of the solutions we have for carriers out there.
Thanks for coming on Cents Per Mile, Kevin.
Thanks, guys.
Hot Seat Services has Rent-A-Recruiter.
Wait!
Hey, Michael, have you heard that Hot Seat Services Rent-A-Recruiter service will place their staff in your organization similar to a temporary hire model?
No way. What else does it do?
Follow me. I have to tell everyone. They take leads in existing databases to put new hires into your business's trucks.
Well, shiver me timbers! What else?
Come on! Their model is more cost efficient because their recruiters are trained and can get your pipeline flowing easier and faster.
No way. Anything else?
No matter how many hires they make, it's a set cost per week, so the more they get, the better their client's cost per hire gets.
Holy sh**.
For more information and to find out for yourself, go to hotseatservices.com.
All right, so I mean, I think Kevin touched on it. I one thing that we hadn't talked about yet was A/B testing. We talked about, possibly just doing some stuff to get your name out there and separate yourself. That's your biggest tool, because you can try things, and if it doesn't work, then you just pivot. And I think A/B testing can show you what works and what doesn't. I mean, Charles, I'm pretty sure you do that.
You have to do that, and it has to be a fair A/B test, because much to what Kevin was saying, if you're doing this provider with this recruiter and then this provider with this group of recruiters, it's not a level playing field. Often that's some of the things I see is people are trying to do an A/B test, but they forgot the whole premise of it, which was to actually test these things on an even foot, and they're not quite even. And then the whole result and test is skewed. So you do have to make sure that this is formatted in a way that it can give you the data that you're looking for. But I think when we're talking marketing, it goes even beyond that. A lot of times it's, I need driver leads in the trucking sector. All right, that's great. But what's the things that drive those leads? Often when I was looking for a job, I might have saw a job ad, but then I went to the website. Maybe I did a Google search. Companies need to work on their branding. They need to work on getting their name out there. And there's just so many tools where you can leverage all of those for a more holistic approach versus I just want driver leads. And then they wonder why no one's coming over to them.
Well, and I think there are definitely, there's two sides to it. And I tend to always talk about the content side and that sort of stuff, but there is a very, very scientific data side to all of this. So like, cause everything you put out, like every Facebook will show you metrics, even on your personal stuff. When you do it, like you can see your engagement and things like that. It's, and it gets more advanced when you're doing business pages. There is data and you can see how everything is doing to know if you're doing it right. And when you do try stuff, if it boosts that, then that's probably the direction you should go.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to encourage people to do is, besides doing a proper A/B test, also go out there and work direct with some of these vendors. You'd be surprised that when you're working with an agency, there's a convenience factor. But when you're working direct with the vendor, they get that relationship. They get to know what's driving your brand. They get to make recommendations directly to you without a middleman. These are things that are going to help you further your initiatives and move that needle. Just like with branding in general, like not everything has to point back to a job ad. Some of the most successful initiatives I've deployed were ones where, hey, I had my job ads running, but I also had a branding piece where it was just educational about the company. Maybe it was a newsletter. Maybe it was just, exposure. Maybe it was a culture piece. Like these things go hand in hand. And Tenstreet talked about it earlier, not putting all your eggs in one basket. That doesn't just mean with vendors and who you're using. It means with your approach.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that's huge. And like you're saying, like I'm saying, there is a science to it and there's a data side to it. And I think our next guest has a decent amount of experience with that.
Our next guest is Jacob Ridge with CDLLife, and welcome back to Cents Per Mile, Jacob.
A lot of great things have already been discussed here. I think everyone's hitting the nail on the head with creative diversity, A/B testing, finding ways to stand out. Make sure you have your message and you know who you are and what you're talking about. What is your appeal and your approach to drivers? I even think talking about vendor diversity is really smart as well. I think those are important things to discuss. I think one thing that is important for people to really go beyond just how can I do everything and how can I try all the strategies and throw them at my campaign and make sure I can get the most out of it. How am I making sure that I'm tracking my dollars appropriately? A really important thing is understanding what your goals are. Your goals, not just broadly speaking, I think you probably understand you need leads and you need to get drivers into your recruiting department to be worked by recruiters and turn into hires. But you might want to think about having essentially a goal for every dollar spent, a goal for every single piece of content that you put out there, every single image, every single word, every single piece of delivery on every single platform. When you're talking about creative diversity, you're making sure that you are capturing drivers' attention and they're not just getting bored of your message. When you're talking about copy diversity, you're talking about making sure that you cover all the bases and you hopefully capture that little piece of thing that they're interested in by making sure that you're putting out everything that you can. And when you're talking about vendor diversity, you're talking about, drivers exist in a lot of different places and people have a lot of different means of delivering to drivers. And you want to make sure you cover all those means. You want to get drivers everywhere they are. And we're in a day and age now where targeting is very advanced. I think a lot of people have a beat on where drivers are, and we're making sure that we're delivering content to them. It's fair to say that that's covered. A lot of your marketing agencies will have that covered. A lot of your vendors will have that covered. If you want to go one layer deeper, you need to start looking about what are your advanced goals down funnel. And when you're talking about doing creative diversity, you're talking about what's the goal for every single ad. When you're talking about the vendor diversity, you're talking about, what am I accomplishing with this vendor? What is my delivery goal here? What am I doing with this vendor differently and with their delivery than this other vendor? Then you want to go another layer deeper than that. And I'm, layers and layers deeper. A lot of people, I think, need to consider remarketing as a core piece of their entire strategy of all those goals. I often encounter people who marketing is just kind of the cherry on top. It's like something extra. It's like, what more can I do? I think it needs to be more fundamental. You need to have a plan for every single person that you've ever encountered and how you're going to continue encountering them. Every single driver, You need to have them appropriately dispositioned down to not just good lead, bad lead. You need to have them dispositioned into, their interests, their hangups, the timing that's right for them. You need to have a remarketing strategy for every single piece. And the remarketing strategy will include what specifically am I delivering to them, where, what message, what creative, at what time, and what am I specifically trying to accomplish with that? Not just one piece of content is going to suddenly turn a driver into a hire, but one piece of content can get you another phone call. One piece of content can get them to fill out more information. It can get them to give you a more clear timeline on what they're trying to consider when they're going to move. And then you need to have kind of a KPI for every single one of those. Your KPIs should be, how am I moving every single driver into the next phase? And what am I doing to accomplish that with my marketing strategy? And that can get really robust really quickly, because you're talking about a bunch of different drivers who are all into different buckets, who all have a different content strategy. That content strategy has its own timing strategy, has its own unique goal, because you're trying to get something specific from that driver to get them to move on to the next phase. And I think building out a remarketing strategy in that sense, understanding that it can get incredibly deep. And you want to, I don't know if many people have considered this, and maybe they have in the recruiting sense, but you want essentially an account-based marketing approach for every single driver. Look at every single driver as a unique account that you need to manage. And a driver is a whole person, a whole individual with unique interests, motives, hangups, and you need to address all of them individually. And every individual is different, so you need to have almost an individual plan for every single driver. So building out a supremely robust remarketing strategy, lots of different content, lots of different ways you're going to deliver them, understanding your timing and your goals. You want to, in a sense, expand your timeline for your driver. You understand that the driver has an entire lifespan, their career, and you need to have a plan for how you're going to be engaged with them through every step of their career.
Yeah, Jacobs, that's some great takeaways. And it sounds like there's a bunch of layers to this shit. I mean, like, you have to dissect this at a macro level to really understand what those journeys look like. So knowing that, if someone wanted to reach out to you or dissect this to understand better how their marketing's flowing, how would they find you?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage everyone to reach out to us. You can get a lot of information about us on cdlconnect.io. You can learn more about kind of our philosophy and how we approach this stuff. You'll see us talk a lot about intent, which is how we are focusing on raising that engagement level from the driver. And we can begin to help build out remarketing strategies for you, all kinds of marketing strategies for you, based upon your goals. You start listening to us, your challenges, your goals, down to every single little detail, and we can start helping build out strategies for you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on Cents Per Mile, Jacob.
Thank you.
All right, Charles and Paul, one of my favorite marketing things is knowing when it is time to move on. And I think today's episode, it is time to move on. So let's wrap it up and get out of here.
Yeah, all good things come to an end, and this has been a great episode. So thanks for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. See you next time.